Hello there, beautiful friends. Michael Phillip here, and as we all know, in this time of existential listlessness, in this drought of purpose we're all in, it is exceedingly easy to get confused, to be caught up in the wrong path, to pursue paths of supposed meaning making that are, to put it bluntly, just a waste of time. You know, we've all come across countless quote-unquote hacks, self-help books, new age mirages, gurus, people who swear they aren't gurus and then proceed to use the exact playbook of a guru. And all of that just leads to confusion, to this murk, to this sort of philosophical sewage that's so thick that at times it almost feels like there is no truth, there is no greater purpose, there is no true path to meaning making. But my friends, there are these rare human beings that really do accomplish something remarkable and then return with the elixir, to put it in mythological terms, that return with the real stuff, the nutrition we all need to make sense of our own lives. And my friends, Colin O'Brady is absolutely one of those people. He holds 10 world records. He's accomplished insane feats like walking across Antarctica, dragging 300 pounds of supplies with no support through the incredibly harsh elements there. He's summited some of the world's tallest peaks in record time. He rowed a boat across a body of water called the Drake Passage, which is this treacherous stretch between South America and Antarctica. So he's obviously an incredible athlete, but he has an even more incredible mind, and he's just so humble. He's also the best-selling author of the book The Impossible First, and his new one, which is called The 12-Hour Walk. And it's such a genius concept, and we'll get more into what the 12-hour walk is, but I'm definitely going to do it. It's like the perfect balance of initiation, intention setting, and just approachability, something that everybody can do. But in this one, we riff on so much: the lost importance of initiation, the secret to really finding those 10 out of 10 moments in life that we all want, and the surprising, really almost mystical experiences Colin had at the depths of his most grueling challenges. And one of my favorite bits, too, that I really want to mention is avoiding those regrets down the road, those moments of looking back on life and wishing I would have done this, I would have done that, because they're not just unique to people like you and me, my friend. As Colin shares, some of the world's wealthiest, most conventionally successful people wish they would have chased that thing, wish they would have given more thought to their life's purpose. That and so much more, but I shan't blather on any further. For everything on Colin, including his latest book, The 12-Hour Walk, ColinO'Brady.com are the keyboard mudras you want to input. And quick self-promotional Bardo, of course, I would deeply appreciate if you smash that like and subscribe button here on YouTube. We also have over 300 audio-only podcasts that you can find wherever you listen, the vast majority of which are never going to be up in video form, so do subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And the very best way to support Third Eye Drops is to join us on Patreon at patreon.com/Third Eye Drops, via which we have far too much going on to completely cover, but I will cover some of it. We have a new endeavor called the Wonder Gym, which we're starting this month. It's going to feature an expert guest, and it's going to be a interactive, instructional, mind meld, hang kind of situation. Very excited for that. We have a book club. You can get physical rewards depending on your pledge level. We have a patron-only Discord server. So join us, initiate yourself in the Wonder Dip, meet like-minded diginauts, all on patreon.com/Third Eye Drops. And with that, my friends, I really could not be more excited to pass through the portal of this mind meld with the wise, wonderful, humble Colin O'Brady. Colin O'Brady, I don't even know where to start with you, man. I didn't say this just before we recorded, but I've actually been aware of you since you were in the midst of the Antarctica trek. I had a friend show me your Instagram, and I could not believe it. It literally sounds like someone thought, what is the most impossible, ridiculous thing a human being could try to do that would mean almost certain death or failure, and you did it. And you did it, man. Like
Yeah, well,
that's the kind of person you are, just to sort of set
thank
the
you very
stage here.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it might have been impossible too. I called that project the Impossible First, and some people think that I named it that. It's sort of like, oh, he must have just been like, oh, it's impossible. Let me prove that it's actually possible. It was actually like, actually, this might be impossible. So let's give it a shot, see what happens. So yeah, man, it was a wild ride and a journey, and grateful to make it to the other end. But it was not without a lot of hardships, that's for sure.
I literally can't even imagine. Despite that being an overused turn of phrase, I literally cannot even imagine. And there's so many aspects of it that I want to explore with you. So many different layers, like the mental, the physical, the potentially spiritual elements of it. But first, I guess just for some background, you had a history as kind of an endurance athlete. But how did you get to a point where you started thinking, I want to try things that no human has ever done before? Because that kind of mental barrier, everyone has this sort of common cast of kind of barometers. Like a marathon is very difficult for a normal person, let's say. For a lot of people, they would consider that to be like, this is sort of a peak feat of my life, maybe. It's like a bucket list thing. But you're thinking beyond that. Like you're thinking no human has ever done this thing before, and I think I could be that guy. How do you get to that mental strength?
Yeah, if I'm being honest, it's iterative, right?
Mm,
It happened over time. It's not like I just woke up one day and said, "Hey, can I walk across Antarctica?" Right? To me, when I think back to that moment, I go back in time, and it actually goes back to a huge hardship experience in my life. Which is
mm,
interesting, and how we can kind of grow actually from somewhat of hardship. When I was just after college, I had graduated and didn't have a lot of money when I was a kid, but always dreamed of traveling the world. And I saved up money painting houses, every summer, and said one day when I graduate from college, I'm going to buy, one way the cheapest plane ticket I can buy and go like see a little bit of the world. I just had this curiosity for adventure in that context. Great experience for me. I hitchhiked through New Zealand. I actually ended up meeting my now wife in Fiji, so we've been together for 15 years. So that was a win right out of the box for that trip. But I found myself on this small beach in rural Thailand, and I, silly enough, jumped the flaming jump rope.
mhm, mhm,
Maybe
mhm,
didn't have a fully formed prefrontal cortex at 22 years old, and thought that looked like a fun idea. And in an instant, my life changed. I lit my body on fire. Literally, if the excess kerosene sprayed me after I tripped on this rope, lit my body on fire to my neck. Jumped into the ocean, which extinguished the flames, which saved my life, but not before about 25% of my body was severely burned. And you're probably thinking, like, where the hell is this? You asked me, how'd you get mentally tough? It's like, this almost killed yourself. Well, interestingly enough, that was, for sure the worst experience of my life to date at that point. And the physical pain was immense. I was not just in, burning yourself would be terrible any place, but I'm in rural Thailand. I'm on a small
mhm.
beach. There's a moped ride down a dirt path to a one-room nursing station. I underwent 8 surgeries in the sort of makeshift ICU where there was a cat running around my bed and across my chest. I mean, pretty much the worst set of circumstances. But believe it or not, despite the physical pain of no skin on the lower half of my body, severe second and third degree burn, the worst part was actually the emotional element of that. When a doctor walks in and very earnestly, just doing his job, he says, "Hey, you'll probably never walk again normally." Because they thought how badly I'd been burned, the ligaments on my knees and ankle joints and things like that, that I would never regain full mobility, that I would never really fully recover from this injury. And I had been a lifelong athlete. I was a swimmer in college. I think that's a terrible diagnosis for any person, but
Yeah.
certainly, someone just like very much in my body, as a young man, Like, sorry, you're never going to be the same. And I'll never forget just the emotional devastation of that moment. Like, it was just this deep, dark downward spiral. I could feel this crushing anxiety and depression and fear just enveloping me. And my, the heroine to this story is my incredible mother, actually. And this gets back to your initial question around mindset. Is she came to my hospital, she found me over in Thailand. She spent a couple months with me in the Thai hospital. I couldn't be moved. I eventually was moved back in a wheelchair, carried on off a series of planes to get home. But when I'm sitting in that hospital, I know now she's my mother. I know now how afraid she was, crying with the doctors, pleading with for good news in the hallways. But she never came and showed me that fear. She came into my hospital room every day with this crazy big smile on her face and this sort of just like air of positivity, daring me to dream about the future.
Wow.
And I'm like, she kept saying to me, like, what do you want to do when you get out of here? Let's set a goal. Let's look towards the future. What else do you want to achieve? And I'm looking down at my legs, like, what are you talking about? Like, life as I know it is over. And she kept pushing me. I now call what she was doing. I actually write about this in my new book, The 12-Hour Walk, this what I call a possible mindset. I sort of define this term, a possible mindset, an empowered way of thinking that unlocks a life of limitless possibilities. Obviously, iteratively, as we get to this Antarctica crossing, it's the same mindset of saying, like, just because no one has ever done this before doesn't mean it can't be done. My mom's looking at me going, Colin, dream without limits. What does your best life look like? And I'm like, Mom, like, I'm never going to walk again normally. What are you talking about? She goes, just close your eyes and visualize. So visualize. I close my eyes and she sees this smile come across my face for a second. She's like, what'd you see? I opened my eyes. I said, oh, it's going to sound ridiculous, but I just saw myself crossing the finish line of a triathlon. Now, she could have very easily said, I said set a goal, but like the legs, maybe something a little more realistic. But again, that possible mindset, this, this belief in these limitless possibilities, despite how bad of a circumstance I was in. So she basically says, in fact, that's your goal. You're gonna race a triathlon. I can already see it too. And she calls over to the Thai doctor. She says, hey, doc, my son's training for a triathlon right now. This doctor's like, what are you talking about? She's like, bring him in some weights. I have this ridiculous photo of myself. I'm bandaged from the waist down. This Thai doctor's looking at me like I'm absolutely crazy. And I'm lifting, 10-pound dumbbells saying, Doc, I'm training for a triathlon. I mean, it's just the ridiculous set of circumstance. So anyways, long answer to your question, but fast forward to, 18 months later, I had finally been released from the hospital after a few months. I was in a wheelchair when I got back to Portland, Oregon. My mom helped me literally take my very first steps out of that wheelchair, all the while thinking about, I got to do this race. And eventually, I moved out of my parents' house, kind of got my first job, moved to Chicago and signed up for the Chicago Triathlon. And then I raced this race after 18 months being told I'd never walk again normally. My first triathlon ever, I not only finished the race, but to my complete and utter surprise, I won the Chicago Triathlon, placing first out of nearly 5,000 participants. And to me, the moral of that story, and again, forgive the long story to kick things off here, but it's in the essence of that moment where the beginnings, obviously in that moment, I wasn't thinking about walking across Antarctica. I didn't even really know much about that at that point. So that wasn't in the front of my mind. But when I trace it back, I think Steve Jobs, I love his quote that says, we can never connect the dots going forwards, but we can connect them going backwards. It's I'm sitting here talking to you right now. And very humbly, I have 10 world records, one of which is being the first person in history to cross Antarctica solo, unsupported, and human powered. And all of those happened, all of those records, all of the adventures, all of this stuff happened after being burned in the fire, after being told I would never walk again normally. And so what's crazy is that in extreme adversity, without my mother, I don't think I'd be sitting here with that. Without that guidance, without that distillation of this possible mindset, this lesson she taught me. But through life's greatest hardship at that point in my life, she also taught me one of my most powerful lessons. And so in a strange way, difficulty, hardship oftentimes has the ability to forge us and make us even stronger. And that's certainly the case for me.
Oh, man. That so deeply resonates with my own personal ethos. And do not apologize for that story, because it is a great story, and it demonstrates what I think are some of the most powerful psychological archetypes that a human being can access. And what I think about, and tell me if I'm projecting this, but what I think about is that moment in Thailand was like an initiation of sorts for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was, maybe it wasn't a near death experience where you saw the light and experienced, mystical, unspeakable things or something, but you thought you had lost your vitality, your health, your ability to celebrate your body. And then it seems like you came out on the other side of that thing with this renewed vigor, with a clear-eyed kind of memento mori, you know, carpe diem sort of energy in you that you didn't have before. And it almost seems like, though I would never wish that experience upon anyone, including myself or whatever, that in some ways it was almost a blessing in disguise. In some ways it almost was like an initiatory experience that got you to realize there are things that are possible. There are things I want to do that I never even conceived of before that I might not do. So do you think, as a follow-up question too, do you think you would have done these things without that experience?
Yeah, no, you sum it up well, perfectly. As an initiation, there's no doubt, right? Again, I would. And you said it perfectly. An initiation, I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy.
Right.
Truthfully, just that is not something I would want anyone to have to go through. That said, I am the person I am because of that, right? I am, it did give me this renewed strength and this renewed, power. Um, the high highs, the places that I've gotten to since then, are a direct result of that. It's interesting. You know, in my new book, The 12-Hour Walk, I talk about this concept that I think is really potent and powerful way that I have at least thought about these types of things, which is I've come to think about life on a spectrum of 1 to 10. One being sort of our worst, lowest moments that we experience, and 10 being our highest highs. And we can talk more about the stories of what it was like to walk across Antarctica, or different experience that I had. But crossing Antarctica and getting to that finish line and becoming the first person, touching this post after 54 days alone, solo, pulling a 375-pound sled, like that was a 10. Like that was an epic, like peak moment, right? But there was a lot of days of -30, -40, pulling the sled, crying,
Yeah.
being afraid. Like there was a lot of ones like along that journey too. Just like, of course, the burn in Thailand is a 1. Absolutely. There's no without a doubt, lowest of lows. But when I crossed that finish line in the Antarctica solo crossing after 2 months alone, I realized I had done this historic thing. I realized that I'm experiencing a 10, not in spite of my ones, but actually because of my ones. I'm getting to that high because allowing myself the risk and the challenge and the difficulty of pushing through these low moments. And what I've come to realize is that in our modern society, my new book is really about helping people unlock their best life, and I'm sure we'll talk about it. It's a core. There's a take home, a call to action that anyone can take on that I really believe in one day will fully shift the trajectory of your life in a positive way. But what I've come to think about in this 1 to 10s is that too often in modern society, we get stuck in this 4 to 6 range, what I call the
Yeah.
zone of comfortable complacency. It's like you got a job, that it's fine. Like it pays the bills, put a roof over your head. Like you don't love it, you don't hate it. It's just like, it's like a 5. But you spend a lot of your time like doing that, because you go to
Yeah.
work every day. This is like 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. Or maybe you're, in a relationship of, a few years or something like that. It's not like a toxic relationship. It's not abusive. It's not like terrible or anything like that. But it's not like you're like cohabitating. Like it's fine. Like you're like, 5, 4, 6, whatever. It's just kind of in that middle range. And what I've come to realize is that the reason people stick in that zone, it's not saying you shouldn't be in that zone at ever. Sometimes you need to be in that zone to rest, recover, recuperate, build, etc. But people are afraid of experiencing any ones. And so they hedge against the risk. Oh, this is fine, so I shouldn't upset the apple cart. Shouldn't make a shift. It's a silly analogy, but it's like you sit at your house, you're like, I want a new kitchen remodel. I want a new appliances. I want new, whatever, tile backsplash or nice flooring or whatever it is. Like that doesn't happen overnight. The first thing you do is you rip all the stuff out of there. You take the plumbing out, you rip up the
Yeah.
floor, all this kind of stuff. Like, it gets worse before it gets that end product. And so again, when I think about those ones and tens, it's like I really encourage people to look at their life. And if you're living in this zone of comfortable complacency, like, the juice of life are in the pendulum swing, the full tapestry. And it's not as if you're like, go burn yourself in a fire so you can feel 10. That's not what I'm saying at all. But it's also saying, but still take that trip, still get on that plane to Thailand, still take that risk, still kind of mix it up so that, like, you can experience the highs and lows and the full tapestry of life, because that fulfillment, that juice, lies on the other side of allowing yourself to experience that full arc, in my opinion.
So true, man. So true. And speaking of your new book, I think it was such a brilliant move on your part to take this angle with the new book, because obviously what you're talking about in terms of these world record setting feats that you're doing is not applicable to 99 point to anyone except you, because literally you're the only one to ever have done these things. So people need an approachable way to try to realize what you're saying in their own lives. And this notion of the 12-hour walk, coupled with what you invite people to do before that, where in the book you actually say, you have an exercise basically where people intention set before doing it, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly.
Yeah,
So it's
absolutely.
intention coupled with this, what I would call initiatory action. And it might sound ridiculous. Like, believe me, I'm allergic to change your life in 5 minutes, you know, like, become enlightened in a weekend, rewire your brain, like these like quote unquote hacks, like these enlightenment hacks that people seem to be obsessed with. I'm allergic to these things. However, I think real initiation is one of the most powerful things a person can experience. And I think, as you're alluding to, that requires a level of hardship. I don't think it has to be, necessarily a real life threatening event, though I do think those events probably are the most powerful. But it needs to be something that's challenging and is coupled with intention. And we have lost that combination, that catalytically powerful combination of things in modern life. We don't have any real powerful initiations. And we have what I call sometimes proxy initiations. Like, you graduate, you get promoted, you maybe saying maybe getting married is a powerful initiation for a lot of people, but honestly for some people, I think it's just a thing they feel like they have to do.
It's like the next step. You're
Right.
supposed to do it because you're this
Yeah.
age or you're this, what, yeah, totally. Well,
So
no, and
so I'm I sorry, just to wrap it up.
yeah.
I'm just so with you that I think this plan it's not even a plan, this action that you lay out in the book is a just brilliant one, man. And I think also, for people to help set the context, the way you open the book is by talking to what are the most conventionally successful people on the planet. Like, the people everybody look at and think, "Oh, I wish I could be wealthy. I wish I could be a multimillionaire, billionaire." And these people have the exact same regrets as you, dear listener. They're thinking, "I wish I would have done that thing." They're thinking, "I wish I would have taken that risk." And you talking to them pulled that out of them. And if they're not happy, the pinnacle, the apex of conventional modern success, are not happy with their life, I think you need to listen to Colin O'Brady, my friends. I think you
Yeah,
do.
yeah. No, it was it was a very powerful moment, as I share in the opening of the book, The 12-Hour Walk. It's, being in this Manhattan penthouse with these, billionaires, and, finally having a vulnerable conversation, have a guy walk over to me and say, wow, some of the stuff you're talking about. I was asking them, what's your Everest? What's your goal? What's your child? What was your childhood dream? Assuming these ridiculously successful, archetype of, like you said, you look at them, oh, they've got all the things in the world. And like comes over to me and it's like, yeah, man, like I missed it. Like, I'm 80 years old now. I have all the money in the world, and like basically offering regret, right? Offering regret of not having the wherewithal or thought or, self-awareness to kind of analyze that, and really realizing that human experience exists at all different levels of social strata, economic disparity, wealth. Well, we're all kind of on this planet trying to figure this thing out, right? But the 12-hour walk, I want to give a little more kind of in-depth context
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
listener who's hearing this for the first time. It's as simple as what it is. It's what you said, and you summed it up perfectly. I too am generally allergic to the 5 minute hack of this, the 5 minute hack of that, etc. But what I am excited about with this concept is, to your very point, like I do a lot of public speaking. My last book was about me crossing Antarctica. New York Times bestseller called The Impossible First, which I'm very proud of, and tells the whole story of Antarctica in depth and all this. But it's like my story, like this is my life story, and it's like people read it and they're maybe there's some implicit inspiration and excitement around it. It's an interesting story, but certainly lots of ups and downs, but it's not direct to the reader. So people are like, wow, man, you crossed Antarctica. That's insane. Like, good for you. You know what I mean? Like, which is genuine. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's a very
Right.
kind thing to say, but it's not necessarily, do you say, like, applicable, or 99.99% of the world is like, yeah, man, but I'm never going to go to Antarctica and walk out there by myself for like 2 months. Like, and I'm like, yo, I've done that. And I don't blame you for not wanting to do that. Like, I get why you wouldn't want to do that. Right. But as we ground that back to what you were saying about us all having the same human experience, what I realize is that we all have this ability to grow, evolve, shift in our own minds. And I guess I'll go a little bit back to the origin story of a 12-hour walk. So at the end of my Antarctic crossing, 12 hours was how far I was pulling my sled every day walking across Antarctica solo. And I was super skinny at the end. I had lost a ton of weight. I was burning 10,000 calories a day. I could only carry
Wow.
7,000 calories. So from day one, I was on a 3,000 calorie deficit. So you can imagine what that looks like on day 54. If you look at some of the pictures from that, I got frostbite on my cheeks and my face and my finger. I mean, I'm beat up. But as my body got weaker and weaker, I had actually deleted all my music, all my podcasts, everything, to just go into this deep meditative flow state. I
Wow.
thought the only way for me to get across this, brutal continent, minus 30, minus 40, 50-mile-per-hour winds, minus 70 wind chill, was to be able to go into a deep, deep, deep place in my mind. And what I ultimately found pulling my sled across Antarctica at the end, and the last chapter of my first book, The Impossible First, is called Infinite Love. It's not called, look,
Wow.
I did it, I'm awesome, or I'm a badass superhuman athlete, or whatever. It's called Infinite Love. And the reason is at the depth of my core, when I was stripped bare of everything, like literally starving, alone, all this, what I found was this deep reservoir of love and compassion and empathy and ultimately energy that propelled me forward. I was, might sound ridiculous, but in the last few days, I was literally on my knees a couple times with my arms outstretched, literally saying infinite love, feeling my wife
Wow.
next to me, my family next to me, the, community at large, next to me, like basically a deep connection with humanity. Funny enough, a little side note to that, I was in New York City a week or two after I finished this crossing doing some medium press, and a friend of mine put on a little event. This, kind of our close community of people, a bunch of friends in New York City, 100 of us or so in a townhouse in the West Village. And so my first time really talking, I just got back from Antarctica. I literally hadn't even been home yet. So it's not like I'd like thought about all this, I'd not like rehearsed or something, like what my response. I mean, people were like, you must have been so alone. And I said, well, you guys all live in New York, right? Like, you're all New Yorkers. Everyone was in this townhouse in this night. And they were like, yeah. And I said, raise your hand if you know the name of the person you share your wall with in your apartment.
Right. Yeah.
Nobody raises their hand, literally nobody. And I'm like, raise your hand the last time you looked at somebody sitting next to you on the subway or in an elevator and like said hello to them, just out of like general human kindness. Not a
Yeah.
single hand goes up. And I'm like, I love New York, by the way. New York's my favorite cities on the planet. Maybe probably my favorite city on the planet. So it's not a knock on New York. I was like, you guys are living here surrounded by 10 million people, and you can be so alone. Yet I was literally the most alone person on the entire planet, but I felt so connected to this power of infinite love, this
Yeah.
humanity,
Wow.
etc. So
Wow.
that was a really powerful moment in my life, something that I carry with me. And I kind of thought, I know it sounds ridiculous on reflection. I kind of thought that I'd like found it. Like I was like, I have this with me. Like I found it. I found this inner peace inside of myself, this sort of equilibrium, which is true in some sense for a long time. But then COVID happened, man. And just like the rest of the world, I was locked in my house. All this bad news on my doorstep or on my phone, doom scrolling the news. People are dying, all this fear, all this uncertainty, all the things I had planned were, canceled just like everyone else. And I don't pretend like I had it the worst. I mean, there's people actually dying, right? But I'm sitting in my house, like just spinning my wheels in my brain. And I hit a really low moment during that period of time. I was in a cabin on the Oregon coast with my wife and my dog. Hadn't seen anyone but the two of them in a really long time. And I remember at one point my wife's like, "You haven't even gotten out of your pajamas for like 3 days." I'm just like slumped on the couch, just like another aimless, what the hell is happening in the world kind of moment. I think a lot of people, remember that feeling of spring of 2020, right?
Absolutely.
And I went back in my mind in that moment. I was like, okay, I'm just like grasping for straws. Like, when was the last time I felt like strong and powerful and, sort of at peace in my body? And I was like, well, there was that apex moment, like finishing this Antarctica crossing, this infinite love, this depth of fulfillment. And I was like, what was I doing? Like, what was I actually doing? And I was like, well, I was basically walking alone in silence for 12 hours a day. So I said to my wife, I was like, this is going to sound ridiculous, but tomorrow morning, Oregon coast, I'm going to get up, I'm going to walk out our front door, and I'm going to go for a walk for 12 hours. Don't worry about me. I'll be back by, dinner time or by sundown or whatever. And she just laughs because she knows all the ridiculous things that I get up to with my body or whatever. She's like, all right, have fun. So the next morning I get up and I walk out my door. And I walk out my door on the Oregon coast. But 20 minutes into this walk, my phone buzzes in my pocket. And I instinctively, of course, reach down, who's texting me, like whatever, I'm about to respond to this text. And it's like, wait a second. Like, I've been sitting on my couch, doom scrolling the news, staring at Instagram, Zoom calling my family because I can't see anyone important like in person. And I'm like, what the hell? I don't need my phone. Like, what the hell am I doing? I'm just gonna sit here like text while I'm on this walk. So I throw my phone on airplane mode. And I end up continuing on this 12-hour walk, just, meandering across the Oregon coast all day long, basically for 12 hours. And I come back, and before I walk in the door, my wife looks at me, and before I even say anything, she goes, "You're back." Not like as I'm physically back, but you're back. Like she can just see this look on my face of just sort of this like lit up excitement, fulfillment, just kind of like the light in my eyes has come back. I've shaken loose from this stuck, depressed, anxious kind of state of being that I've been in. And I was like, honestly, I feel better than I have felt in so long. I needed that. And so as the weeks went on after that, of course, it's COVID time. So a lot of people, friends, family members, et cetera, are going through difficult times, right? And you talk to your friends like, oh man, I'm not doing good. Or this remote work thing is really weird. I haven't seen anyone in however long. And I said, well, this might sound ridiculous. You probably, think I'm just the guy who walked across Antarctica. So this is like my own thing. But like started telling people I did this walk. I did this silent walk all day and it really shook things up. I feel so much better. And I don't know if it's the alchemy of the moment or people were just kind of grasping at straws because we were all going through a weird moment in our history, right? But people were like, yo, I'm going to try that. I'm going to do that. And all of a sudden, I had friends, family members, young, old, my 77-year-old mother-in-law, is like, I'm taking the 12-hour walk. And it looked different for every single person. That's what's great about this initiation, so to speak. It's not like you have to be some world-class endurance athlete. My 77-year-old mother-in-law, her 12-hour walk looked like her walking one time around her block, then sitting on her front porch, but alone, maintaining her silence and solitude, and then walking another time around her block. So she may have covered a mile. I've had people say, oh, I walked super long. I'm a badass endurance out that I did 50 miles. It doesn't matter if you go 1 mile or 50 miles. What matters is that you take this day by yourself, you put your phone on airplane mode, and you take this walk. And so it's at its core, this book, I mean, it's rich storytelling from all my adventures. It's about limiting beliefs. It's about mindset. There's a lot in the book. But at its core is not this, oh, you read my book, believe every word I said. It's like, you know what? Don't take it for yourself. Have an actual, your own experience, your own felt somatic experience. That as you say, an initiation. I love that word. To go experience this for yourself. And it's simple. It is free. Anyone, literally anyone can do this. You can do this tomorrow. You don't have to train for it for a year. It's like it meets you right where you're at. And in that moment, what I found in those 12 hours is you might hit some low lows. Lots of doubts and fears might come through your mind. Your feet might get tired. You might be a little bit out of your comfort zone. You might probably be a lot out of your comfort zone. Most people say they haven't spent more than about 30 minutes by themselves alone in silence in their
Yeah.
entire adult life, let alone 12 hours. But I have yet to meet a single person who hasn't gotten back to their front door after the 12 hours being grateful,
Yeah.
being fulfilled, having some sort of shift. And when I say invest one day, unlock your best life, it it can read, I suppose, as this 5-minute hack to this whatever, but it's actually saying the ripple effect of this initiation, what that triggers, the 1%, the 5%, the 10%
Hmm.
shift
Hmm.
that can make because of taking this moment to check in with yourself has this exponential ripple effect throughout your life. I have literally seen this change lives. And for me, I'm excited about all my expeditions, all my adventures in this, but why I'm so excited about this book and releasing this to the world is my goal is to inspire 10 million people to do the 12-hour walk. Like I say, it's free. It's not like I get $1 for every
Yeah.
person doing it. It's just because I believe fundamentally we will live in a better world and a better community and better planet when people take a moment to have the self-awareness, check in with themselves. And it really, as you can probably hear in my voice, I'm just passionate and excited
Yeah.
to share this idea with the world.
Well, you're getting karmic dollars or something. I swear, because people so badly need this. As you pointed to, people do not slow down and reflect. If you are in the spectrum of people who supposedly have their shit together, these are people who are sitting down and maybe they're meditating for like doing like 20 minutes of mindfulness a day, right? And for me, that's great. It's like just enough to sort of get some distance from the mental miasma and the recursive thought loops and the anxieties and whatever that you're dealing with, and get some space from that, and that's great. But it's not enough to really get your psyche to catch up with you, to really do some soul searching, to really reflect on your life and say, is this what I want? Am I on this path of 4 to 6 that you pointed out? And I mean, let's do some mental projection. What is my mood on my deathbed at this rate? What am I thinking about my life? Am I feeling satisfied? Am I going out with a smirk on my soul after this life? And sadly, I don't think many people are on a path where they can give an emphatic yes to that question, and that is a tragedy. That is an absolute tragedy. And I'll tell you why. For me, this is not one of those rewire your brain in 5 minutes things, because there's one major difference, and the major difference is that in all of those supposed techniques, it's some trick coming from outside. It's like, do this thing, try this technique. And what you're offering people is to reconnect with what's inside, to reconnect with their psyche, to reconnect with what I'm comfortable calling a soul, to reconnect with the deep nature that what you call infinite love, man. I mean, come on. That's not a hack. That's not some sellable thing. That's like the human birthright that we're all feeling sadly so separated from,
And what's
because yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, sorry to cut you off. I was just excited to say, like, and it's what's so funny, ironic, but also beautiful and special about this is it's like, to your point, it's like, it's not like, hey, go buy this thing or go to this other place that you're not at. It's like, yo, man, like you literally have all the tools inside of you. Like,
Yes.
walk outside your front door by yourself. Like, you don't have to go collect something that you don't have. You don't have to this, like, it's crazy the world we live in, and this is again not to vilify technology. I'm on social media, I'm on my phone, we're on a computer right now, we're talking to each other. Like, I love all of that, but we aren't necessarily wired to always have these instantly dopamine hits
Hmm.
constantly,
Hmm.
constantly, constantly, and we have forgotten how to just be. And I talk, each one of the chapters in this book are really, dive into each one of what I found to be the 10 most common limiting beliefs that are holding people back. And they're common, right? I surveyed my Instagram audience. I talked to thousands of people and just asked that same question: what's holding you back from living your best life? And I didn't get thousands of different responses. I got the same, 7 to 10 responses over and over again. I don't
Mm.
have enough money. I don't have enough time. I'm not strong enough. What if I fail? I'm afraid people are going to criticize me. And each one of the chapters in the book kind of breaks down one of those. But one of the ones I find to be potentially the most powerful, all of them are important, is around intuition. And this
Mm.
classic, like, well, I don't know the answer. I don't have the answer. I don't know the answer. And when people say it to me, I don't know the answer, it's generally in the context of some big decision that they're weighing, right?
Yeah.
Like, I've got a family and kids, and I just got offered this promotion, but it's going to require me to move my family to the other side of the country. But my kids are, up in community, and playing on sports. I'm making a random thing up, right? And they're playing on sports team. They're integrated in their community. They got lots of friends, whatever. I don't know what the right thing is here. And that's a tough decision, right? Because there's pros and cons on either side of that. But what I find is people go into this, that's one of a gajillion different, examples, right? You go into this analysis paralysis. You start writing
Yeah.
this long pro and cons list. You're like, well, could it be
Yeah.
this? It could be this. It might be this, or it might be that. Should I marry this girl or should I not? Should I da this? You start like spinning, spinning, spinning. And what more often is not is this analysis paralysis, right? Of just like no decision is made because the decision's like, I don't know. I don't know the answer. And what I found, again, this is one of many byproducts of the 12-hour walk, but one I'm passionate about is when you stay alone in silence for 12 hours, something you most people have not ever done, exceptionally rare that people have like, oh yeah, I do that all the time. I mean, it's pretty rare, right? With no external stimulus, no music, no podcasts, like I said, no social media, etc. What you quickly realize on some of these big questions is you actually do know the answer. Like
Mm-hmm.
when you actually start listening to that deep inner voice, that gut, that intuition, whatever you want to call it, you're like, man, like I know the answer. It might be
Yeah.
hard to just admit that to yourself, but you can keep yourself distracted, right? Like, oh, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about something else. But when you're alone, you're facing yourself, you're looking directly in the mirror like you are on this walk. You're like, oh man, like I know what the right answer is to this big question. And I write about this in the book, from the context of a very tragic event in my life. Last year in Pakistan, I lost 5 friends in a really intense climbing accident, when climbing K2 in winter, and ultimately. My intuition turned me around. Like when everything was still going good, there was something in my inner being, even though I'm the guy who pushes through, who does the hard things, who sets the world record, whatever. There was this moment, that I talk about more in depth in the book where I was like, something's off for me. Something's off. I don't know what it is. Like there was just something telling me like, stop. Today's not the day. Turn around. And I didn't try to convince my friends. I didn't try to this, but I just said, hey guys, I'm turning around here. And they were like, you're crazy. What do you mean? We're going to summit this mountain. We're going to get all this global acclaim. No one's ever climbed K2 in the winter. And I don't have to go into all the details of that story, but they never came back. And my intuition saved my life. And again, it's not always through a life or death lens in terms of like literally life or death. But these big decisions, these hallmark decisions that you said when you're on your deathbed and you look back, you go like, man, did I stay with that job for 25 years even though when I was a young man I knew this wasn't the right path for me? My intuition knew this. When you get to be that 80-year-old man that I describe in the first chapter of this book, like you don't have the time to go back and make that decision. But you do
Yeah.
have that moment to make a shift right now. Again, I don't have the answer. What's so beautiful, it's like my life hack for you isn't I have the answer for you. It's like, hey man, go inside of yourself. You have the answer.
Yeah,
You
man.
are the one
Yeah.
that has the answer for you.
Yeah. And I'm so with you because in the particular, the answer is different. In the macro, the answer is the same, right? It's the Joseph Campbellian follow your bliss, right? It's the That's what we're meant to do in this life. Like you've got something in you. You've got some gnawing thing. You've got some desire. You've got some dream. We all have that. I mean, if you don't have it, then you're, I don't know. But everyone I've met seems to have it. And we create this kind of like cloud of excuses around that impulse. Or maybe the more common mistake is we don't ever explore that impulse and try it and see what really feeds it, what really, gives you that satisfied, charged up feeling when you're doing that activity. And that's why I've been doing this podcast for 5 years is like I get to talk to people like you. We get to have this dialogue where this like sort of third thing emerges out of the conversation of like unspoken understanding and resonance, and that for me feeds it. That for me is like, yes, keep going toward that, keep understanding through this multifaceted sort of like menagerie of human experiences. And that's what I think everyone has in common that's ever inspired me, that's ever done something worth appreciating, is they followed that thing at some point. They actually said, threw caution to the wind, said, I know the risks full well, fuck it, I'm going, and you got to eventually hit that point. And it may not be one, but to your point, it may be iterative, it may be something you're building up to, and in fact it probably has to be. It's probably not going to be one catalytic experience, but many moltings, many shedding of layers, many try, partial success, but if I do it this way next time it will be more. That's what we're talking about in all reality. But once you taste that, I think you start to get it, and then you become sort of obsessed with getting it more and more and more. And I'm even comfortable calling that like a version of destiny. I'm even
Mm.
comfortable calling that like a version of what we're quote unquote meant to do on this planet. And there, as you're talking about it, like this kind of initiatory wandering, this is something we've lost touch with. That is a well
Yes.
established practice. The
Yes.
Native American vision quest, the Grail Knight initiations, like, this is something where like all the Grail romance stories are basically, a lot of them at least, are like a knight wandering and a knight having these like mystical experiences and epiphanies as they're on this initiatory wandering quest. Like, have you seen the movie The Green Knight, for instance?
I have not, but I love what you say about that because it's funny. Like with the 12-hour walk, like I'm not trying to like trick people by any means, but I think I'm glad to see that sort of Eastern philosophy, meditation, yoga, things like that have obviously been adopted more
Mm-hmm,
widely
mm-hmm.
and more every single day, which is fantastic. But there still is this like in some subset of the population, this I don't know, aversion to the woo woo, whatever you want to call
Yeah,
that, right? Like
yeah.
I'm very comfortable in that space. Like myself, I was born on a hippie commune
All
in
right,
Olympia,
yeah.
Washington, with Bob Marley playing on repeat while 30 hippies were smoking pot. My mom played Bob Marley and birthed me on a futon. So I've clearly, been surrounded by that plenty in my life and feel very comfortable in that space. But it's interesting how you can say a certain word and it just, oh, I'm not into mindfulness. I'm not into meditate. That's not for me,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I'm like, cool, man. Like you're into walking. Like I don't have to call it a meditation. I don't have to call it a vision quest. Like you very perceptively are like, well, yeah, man, that's clearly what this is. This is a walking meditation. This is an initiation. This is like something as old as time. As you said, like I didn't invent a walking quest of some sorts. The wisdom of the ages of cultures across different times and generations have seen the value in things like this. But in a modern context, it's like, call it whatever you want. I'm just like, yo, man, put your shoes on,
Totally.
walk out your front door. Like that's chill. But you're 100% right. And I want to touch on something else that you said, which is a little bit what I frame in the limiting belief of I'm afraid to fail. What you were saying of kind of having those iterative setbacks along the way. And a lot of this book, I mean, again, the easiest book for me to write is let me tell you about all the things that I've done well because I've had these like achievements. But the truth
Mm-hmm,
of the matter
mm-hmm.
is anything that I've ever achieved, including what we talked about the burn accident, has come with a massive amount of setbacks, a massive amount of failing, lots of ones on my way to all of my tens, right? And again, that zone of comfortable complacency is like, oh, well, I don't want to have any setbacks. I don't want to have any challenges. I don't want to have any hardships. But there's an entire chapter of the book that's all around this fear of failure, which is super common. It's an understandable fear, right? Like this, I don't want to fail. Like that just feels like terrible. But I kind of reframe that into like, what I've realized is failure plus perseverance equals success. And
Right.
success, you can define success however you want. That can be fulfillment, that can be money, that can be achievement, that can be many things. It's a broad term. So I'm not defining that for you. But I also say winners lose the most. Winners lose the most,
Yeah.
right? Like it's the people that are out there trying things, as you said, following their destiny, following their heart, following their passion. And their first setback, their second setback, their 10th setback, they're not like, wow, I must be on the wrong path. They're like, no, I'm going to keep iterating. I'm going to keep pushing forward. And that, again, that's one of these experiences that I think is valuable, that can also imprint during the 12-hour walk. One thing that I find interesting about, I guess for lack of a better word, the prescription of the 12-hour walk is, of course, the journey, the quest, the experience is this 12 hours that we're talking about, this one day. But what I've come to find is, so this interesting byproduct is the experience actually starts right now. And I'll go deeper on what I mean by that. Is you're listening to this podcast right now. You probably never heard of this ridiculous 12-hour walk thing or whatever before we started. We're chatting here about it and telling you about this new idea, this book that I have around this. And something's happening in your mind when you're hearing this for the first time. Like, you're either going, oh my God, this is the best idea I've ever heard of. I'm doing this tomorrow. That's like a small percentage of people. And there's maybe a tiny percentage, hopefully not too many, but Colin O'Brady is the stupidest person I've ever heard. This is the worst freaking idea ever. I'm turning this podcast off. This is the dumbest thing ever. Okay, so that's like some other percentage of people. But I think most people fall in between those two extremes, right? Most people are like, okay, I'm listening to this podcast. It's sort of interesting. I mean, maybe, I don't know. You start bargaining with yourself. Should I do this? Shouldn't I do this? Like, because I'm suggesting this to you, right? And we're talking about it. In this moment right now, and this is why I say the experience of this journey, the actual initiation, the process of evaluating your own limiting beliefs that are holding you back starts right now. Because what I've found that happens for people when you suggest this is their interest is piqued in some regard, but then there starts to be a bargaining. There starts to be a little bit of like, well, this guy sounds like he's got some interesting stuff to say, but 12 hours, is that really for me? Like, I'm not really in that good a shape, or, I don't have enough time for that. I got busy life and family and kids. Like, I can't take a whole day off from doing this thing, or like, well, if I take a day off from work, I'm gonna have less money. Like, limiting beliefs implicitly, this is a part of the human experience. And that's why in this book, I don't say I am impervious to limiting beliefs. I actually bring you into stories over and over again of me, myself, the guy who's achieved the things or whatever, experiencing those limiting beliefs viscerally. I still have negative self-talk. That is part of the human experience. But in this moment, whatever, even one or two or handful of limiting beliefs that are popping up in your mind as you're hearing this, why I say it starts now is right now in this moment, a mirror is being held up to you. A mirror is being held up to your own internal dialogue, your own interior thoughts. And what I have found is that the 12-hour walk ends up being this interesting stand-in for anything else in your life, your own Everest, your own goals, your own best life. Meaning, if you take an honest look in the mirror and say, what were the first 3 limiting beliefs that popped into my mind when Colin mentioned the 12-hour walk 20 minutes ago for the first time? What were those? And what I've found, and it's like I said, an interesting byproduct, is those are more often than not the same limiting beliefs that are looping in your mind on all sorts of other things. This is not a one-off thing. This is something that's looping in your mind as dozens of experiences and opportunities and questions arise in your mind. You have the same limiting belief, the same excuse, the same fear, etc. around that. But I'm not just pointing that out to say, oh, well, those are your faults. Look in the mirror and take a hard look in the mirror in this. I'm actually saying, here's an opportunity. The reason we say limiting beliefs is these aren't truths. These are not limiting truths. These are not limiting facts. These are beliefs. Beliefs can be shifted. Beliefs can be evolved. They can be quieted down. And what happens is, if you have the gumption to say, I am experiencing this resistance to this idea, but you know what? I'm going to fight through this resistance. I'm going to go to Colin's website, 12hourwalk.com, and I'm going to sign up for this thing just so, it's official. I kind of put my stake in the ground. Like I said, it's completely free. It's just, it's an accountability measure for you to say, I'm doing this and I'm doing this on this day. And I'm going to send you an email. I'm going to say, hey, John, you're doing this next week. I'm so proud of you. Like that. It's simple as that, right? Just a simple step.
Yep.
Then
it's like buying the plane ticket.
Exactly.
It's not real till you buy the ticket. Now, I have a story on this, but please finish.
No, let me finish. I want to hear the story. Let me finish this thought real quick, which is, so you take that step. Now, all of a sudden, your limiting belief might still be there, but you've taken that step. You've taken that one step. Okay, I put it on my calendar. Okay, right? And then I send you a couple of emails and say, all right, man, you still doing this? It's happening in 2 days. Like, I got you. I'm cheering for you. I'm rooting for you. What ends up happening is you complete the 12-hour walk. And all sorts of things happen. This is not the only thing, right? But you get back to your front door and you feel proud. You feel good. I did something. I did something different. I did something unique. I shook loose some things in my brain or whatever. Then a week from now, some other opportunity comes up, and that same limiting belief, that same cycle that happened right in this moment when I was suggesting the 12-hour walk comes up for you. And you start going, oh, hello there, limiting belief. I
Yeah,
recognize
yeah,
you. I
yep,
recognize you. But guess what? Last time I had this initial fear, I fought through it. I didn't listen to you. And what happens is that voice, that negative voice, that limiting belief voice gets quieter and quieter and quieter. And what gets louder and louder and louder is that possible mindset, that mindset of this belief in limitless possibilities, that mindset that believes that you are strong, that you can battle through, a difficult situation, that difficulty, that a little bit of being uncomfortable actually leads to you being stronger. And so you start to rewrite those beliefs in your own mind. And that's that ripple effect on the other side. And so, like I said,
yep.
the 12-hour walk starts right now. It's up to you how you react to this moment, this invitation, this initiation. But be honest with yourself. What's popping up in your mind, and how might those other things be applying to your life? Now, I want to hear about you buying the ticket. I want to hear about the
Woo!
plane ticket.
Woo! Yeah, you got me. You got me so juiced up, man. You got me so juiced up. And this also really resonates with so much of what I'm interested in from sort of mythopoetic psychologists like Carl Jung. He always uses like he's obsessed with imagery. So, you know, maybe he would say you don't you don't kill the demon, you befriend it. And you befriend it by forming a relationship with it, right? So if you have this fear, you don't defeat it by pushing it away, locking it in a box. You defeat it by going into it over and over and over again and developing a fluency and a familiarity with what that feeling is. And like you said, then it begins to shrink. Then now suddenly there's a leash on the demon. Now suddenly maybe the demon's doing work for you, you know? Um, but yeah, for me, I've never obviously hiked Everest. We probably would have covered that by now if I had. But like my psychical Everest for me is I went to the Peruvian rainforest a couple of years ago and drank ayahuasca 5 times. And
Cool.
believe me, there were a lot of ones in that experience. If
Yes.
you for people listening, like you know, purging, absolute just feeling like in pits of despair, absolutely feeling like I'm poisoned, absolutely feeling like I'm literally lowering my soul into the pits of hell. And then I did have like the summit moment. I did have the conquering moment. I did have the exact same moment you're talking about, where just when it's the darkest, you hit this well of just like infinite interbeing, interconnection, wisdom, intelligence, feeling like you have the answer. And it's so obvious, that it doesn't feel like some complex math equation when you get there. It feels like ah, of course, it's been here all along. It's this.
Yes.
Of course, it's
Yes.
this.
Yes.
How did I forget
Yes.
this? And I'm just so with you that by going like by daring to go into that fear and daring to actually let the fear fully come in, and maybe in the 12-hour walk you're not sincerely considering I might die doing this, but you are creating that space for the things that you normally run away from to catch up with you. And in those things catching up with you, you are working through them in a way that you're never giving yourself an opportunity to. And I mean, I haven't overtly said it, but I'm absolutely doing this, man. I'm absolutely doing the 12-hour walk. I'm absolutely going through in the way that you prescribe. And it's going to be hard for me to like leave the phone behind, leave the technology behind, because the first thing I thought of was like, ooh, I can make some great content out of this. But I'm not going to I'm going to make the content in hindsight. I'm going to fully dedicate and engross myself in that experience and really be alone with my mind, because I know the power of that. And it's hard to get yourself there. You almost have to like Trojan horse yourself into doing it. And again, maybe this isn't a road you pursue, but it's the same thing with like a visionary experience, man, because you sort of create this story to get yourself to consume the thing. And then once it starts to take hold, there's inevitably this oh shit moment where you get out of control. You're like, oh no, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? But it's like, aha, now you're in the work. Now you're in the adventure, and you gotta make it through. You gotta make it through. And getting
So
yourself in a position where you show yourself that you can make it through, So powerful.
Yeah, no, I love that. Well, I'm glad to hear that you'll be participating. I do want to mention this. You know, some people, like I said, this is built to do any day. This is evergreen. Put it on your calendar whenever. Sign up on the website just so that I can send you some extra inspiration and congratulate you on the other side of it. But also, I am. Depending on when you're listening to this, on September 10th, I am galvanizing sort of a global day of doing the 12-hour walk. I'll probably do this multiple times, but sometimes, like I said, do it any day. Like this is for any day. But so for the people that like need that extra oomph, it's like September 10th, a bunch of people. That still means you're doing it alone. That still means you're doing it from your front door. But it's like that extra accountability to know there's a
Mm.
global, large mass participation happening, including myself, on September 10th. So if you're looking for that, you can sign up for that day. But like I said, any day works. Also, in terms of accountability, one thing that is interesting that I have found is I found people saying in little subgroups, you know, you call your brother, you call your best friend, you call your mom, whoever, and you say, hey, let's all do this 12-hour walk thing. How's 2 Saturdays from now? And you all put it on your calendar. Again, you're not walking side by side. You're all walking out your front door in different parts of the country or different parts of your town, city, whatever. But there's that accountability to say, hey, we're all getting up at 6 a.m. on Saturday. Maybe you shoot each other a text message before you put your phone on airplane mode. Just say, are you at your front door? Yeah, I'm at my front door. You a little nervous? Yeah, I'm a little nervous. All right. I can't wait to FaceTime you, or maybe you meet up for dinner tonight after we all do this. There's that accountability
Mm.
to doing this, because this is a solo adventure. But like I said, being alone in Antarctica, I still felt connected to others, right? And so that is another powerful way I have found to kind of find that extra motivation. If you're looking for like, I want to do this, but who can hold me accountable to this? Oh, well, me and my buddy are both going to do this, and then we're going to have this integration moment together. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure
There's
in
a
your
big
even in
word.
your ayahuasca
Mhm. Oh
journey,
yeah.
you know,
God.
you're with other people. You guys are having a dialogue after, you know, explaining, well, this happened to me, that happened to me. It helps to process these types of, you know, experiences with others. So I definitely highly recommend that. You also said something else. I mean, yeah, dude, you and I are a similar wavelength, man. I love your style a lot. I love what you're thinking about,
Thank you.
and I love what you said about the Jungian philosophy there. That's powerful. But the what you're saying before about the intelligence that's inside of us already, that like it's actually already in there. This so I have this nonprofit that's all around inspiring young kids to go out, you know, set big goals, live active and healthy lives, etc. And through that, I've just spent a lot of time speaking in schools. Um, and unfortunately, during COVID, obviously less so have I been in person
Yeah.
in schools. But I've asked this question, and I ask it at the beginning of the book as well to adults, but I've asked it to students over and over again. What's your Everest? What's your Everest? What's your big goal? It's this obvious metaphor for, second, third, fourth, fifth graders. And in a room full of five, you know, a gymnasium, we do like an assembly, and I'll talk to all the kids and show them stories of me being on the summit of Everest or crossing Antarctica or rowing a boat across Drake Passage, these various adventures that I've had, right? And then I say, what's your Everest? I want to hear some of your guys' answers. What happens, so interesting, when I ask that in a room full of students, 500 hands, all 500 shoot up in the air. They
Mm.
all want to tell me their Everest. You know, Colin, my Mount Everest is to be the first person in my family to graduate from college. Or my Mount Everest is to make sure the snow leopards are off the endangered species list. Or, you know, I've heard thousands and thousands of answers to that question, and almost without thinking. But as I start speaking to high school students, a somewhat fewer hands go up. As I speak to college kids, somewhat fewer hands go up. I'm in a corporate environment at a middle, you know, an insurance company or a bank or something like that. I've got like 2 hands out of
Wow.
500 going up, and I'm like, what happened? Like what happened here? And what the so interesting thing is, when I, you know, like I said, coining this term, a possible mindset, you can call it whatever you want. What I've realized is this book, The 12-Hour Walk, the walk itself, etc., is actually not trying to teach you as an adult a new concept. It's actually trying to remind you of something that you were born with, that you already knew. We actually come into this world with a possible mindset, with the belief in the infinite and the limitless possibilities. And it's only because of culture and society and these boxed in narratives that we grow these limiting beliefs. And so that anecdote for me, I said anecdotally experiencing this over and over again, it's like, wait a second. I'm not trying to teach you something new at age 30, age 40, whatever. I'm actually just trying to remind you. And I love what you said about your own sort of peak experience in Peru. It was just like so obvious. You're like, oh, right. This has
Yeah, yeah.
always been here. I just needed to remind myself that this lives inside of me.
100%, man. 100%. You summed it up so well. I mean, it sounds almost like you're so in it. You're so what I would call you're so cemented in with the truth, having experienced it so many times that it like flows. It just flows out of you in such an obvious, real way. And man, I love you. I'm so glad you're out here doing what you're doing, saying what you're saying, inspiring what you're inspiring. And I wanted to ask you too, are you now addicted to these boundary pushing initiatory experiences to a point where where you see yourself just continuing to push the needle, continuing to do these big things, or do you feel like you've been there, you've done that, and you want to move on to like carrying the torch for others now? Is it a mixture of the two? Where is your head at, and what's next for you?
No, it's a great question. You do these big feats or whatever you want to call them, and the I always laugh. The first question anyone asks, like I've still got basically frostbite on my face from Antarctica, and someone asked me, in an interview, so what's next? I'm like,
Yeah,
bro, I
right.
haven't like, yo, give me a second, Um, but I think it's twofold. Actually, you summed it up really well. I think there is. I love adventure. I just personally like it. It's my thing. I sometimes say to people, I think we all have a masterpiece to paint inside of our. Like we all can paint a masterpiece. And my canvas just happens to be the ends of the earth and mountaintops. And I don't blame you if you don't want to go freeze your butt off in remote places. Like, what's your canvas, right? Like, what is your art? What is your expression in the world? It can be anything. It can be entrepreneurship, music, family, love, creativity. Like there's no answer. That's within you. So there is a part inside of me that loves adventure in the context that we're talking about. I've summited Everest twice, things that I've done, whatever. But I also, although I asked the reader on the first chapter, what's your Everest? What's your Everest? As a framing question, just like I asked the students, etc. In the very end of the book, the epilogue of the book, I say, well, I suppose since I've asked you all this question repeatedly throughout this book, it's only fair that I answer this question for myself and let you know what my next Everest is. And a very, very authentic answer for me in the book, in the pages of this book, I say, look, I will still always do adventures because I love it. So don't get me wrong, that'll still be a part of my life. But my next Everest is to inspire 10 million people to take the 12-hour walk. That is what I am most excited about in this moment. It's that, transmuting or sharing this lesson, this wisdom, and inspiring other people to take that. And what's been so interesting, we talked about very briefly at the top of this conversation, I'm proud of my experiences. I'm proud of my first book and the success it's had, all this sort of stuff, right? The adventure stories. I am proud of all that. And even the 12-hour walk, it's full of adventure stories. But there's been an interesting shift in this moment as this book is coming out. The difference between my first book, which is about Antarctica, and someone says, wow, man, that's an amazing adventure, versus someone reading 12-hour walk and going, man, I love that part when you're walking across Antarctica and the other story you share and the other, whatever, pick up the book, check it out. But then their follow-up isn't, wow, man, that's cool what you've done. They go, now I'm thinking about doing the 12-hour walk because of da 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 da, which means that I love storytelling, right? It's as old as time. We've all been inspired by stories, people sharing their experiences, but that can be received in two ways. One is purely entertainment, passively. Yeah, I sat there, I watched this movie, it made me laugh, and I went to bed and forgot about it. I'm glad I passed 2 hours of time. This book will entertain the hell out of you. It makes people laugh. It makes people cry. It's not like a boring academic textbook by
Not at
anything.
all, no.
But at the end, my hope is, and what I've seen at least so far, is that people are thinking about themselves, not selfishly, but because I literally say in the book, I, Colin O'Brady, am not the hero of this story. You are the hero of this story. And so for me, that's my next Everest. That's what's lighting me up. And that's where I get so much inspiration, is sort of that ripple effect and positivity that we can have between one another. And so am I addicted to these peak or pinnacle experiences? I don't think so. I think that they've provided a great way for me to learn and grow, and they will continue to do that. But my Everests also span, different buckets beyond just the physical, beyond just the adventure, beyond just that. The peak experiences, my tens at this point are vast. From the challenge and creativity to create a piece of art like a written work, to starting a family, to all the entrepreneurship, business, all of the other things that I'm curious about in my own life. I think they're all equally valuable and equally as important.
Man, you are such an inspiration. Honestly, I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass. Like it's there's very few people, man, who are doing the things you're doing and really turning it back out on the world. You know, shining that light back on the world beyond just like making a career for themselves, beyond just, you know, developing a following. Like I can really feel that this is like the most important mission to you, and that I hope it takes hold, man, because as I was saying earlier, people so badly need this. People so badly need to, you know, they're like, I'm at least adjacent to a lot of these problematic spiritual things that we were talking about before. The like the hack your mind in 5 minutes, the become enlightened in 5 minutes. And I don't want to be associated with those things.
Hmm.
I do want to be associated with the real shit, with a real invitation to probe the depths of your psyche, of your heart, of your soul, and really reconnect in a powerful, powerful way. And you're one of the few people offering that, man, because it decontextualizes things too, like you were pointing to by saying, oh, you don't think you're into mindfulness, you don't think you're into these wooey concepts. Let's just strip all of that away. Go have the experience. Go have the experience. And there couldn't be anything simpler than doing, just walking, being alone in solitude with your mind for 12 hours. So I honestly am doing this for sure. Listeners,
Amazing.
let's do
Amazing.
this.
Well,
Let's
let's
do
do
it.
this. Let's do
Yeah.
this, man. 12-hour
Yeah.
walk. Yeah. Well, dude, it's been so fun to talk to you, man. Like I said, kindred spirit, I could tell.
Totally.
I could sit here and talk to you for a long time, but hopefully, I can't wait to hear about your experience with the 12-hour walk.
Yeah.
Please, stay in touch and share it with me. And hopefully the people listening as well, are curious. Like I said, the experience starts right now, holding that mirror up to you and this invitation. And it's an invitation to really look inward, do something you've never done before, and really explore the psyche. Because I love to say the most powerful muscle any of us has is the 6 inches between our ears. You know, we think we want to get stronger biceps or the jacked abs for the summer, or whatever silly like physical goal. We know you got to push the bench press up. You got to do those squats. You got to do those lunges, whatever. But too often we forget. And that's why I use that word muscle very intentionally. Like the mind, you want to flex and develop that muscle. You want to have the equivalent of the 6-pack abs, like of your brain, of your interior dialogue. You got to flex and develop it. And the 12-hour walk is an invitation and something that anyone can do. Like I said, I don't care if you go for 1 mile or 50. The challenge, this is a mental exercise that has really positive dividends that can meet you right where you're at. And it might be hard. That's part of it. That and most initiations are. You know, this isn't a hedonistic thing, but it will lead to some deep curiosity, fulfillment, and hopefully deep impact on the other side for sure.
Amen, brother. Thank you for coming on the show. This has been a fabulous one of my favorite mind melds ever, for sure. Thank you so much for doing it. And I know the book's going to be a hit. It has to be.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate that.